Hello there, AP Human Geography students. Let's learn all about where stuff is made in Asia. Alright, so Asia makes a whole lot of cool stuff, and every Asian country has their own sort of specialization, sort of something they do better than anybody else. So I want you to remember where these countries are, especially on a map. So I want you to visually know where they're at. That's an important part of this lesson as well. Okay, gotta click this. This is just a little bit of a review. This was all from Unit 1, but I want it to be fresh in your head for this as well. So a site is where something is. It's sort of like the exact location, the address, the GPS coordinates, and situation is where it is in relation to other things around it. So you would say this is next to this. That is situation. And there's some examples right there, but just know those words will come up in the FRQ related to this lesson. Okay, comparative advantage. You should have already gotten this word from, I think, key issues or something else, but that's really the whole point of this lesson. And it is the reason why you would choose one place over another. Okay, why would you run a casino hotel restaurant in Las Vegas better than with people from Bismarck, South Dakota? Well, workers from Las Vegas are much more familiar with the world of casinos, hotels, and restaurants. Where would be a better place to have a beach theme park? Miami, Florida, or Toronto, Canada? Well, Miami, Florida, because it's right there on the beach, and people go to Miami expecting to go to the beach anyway. And then, what would be a better place to create a restaurant called Pleasure Pork Palace? Mecca or Beijing? Well, in Mecca, people don't eat pork, so Beijing, China would have to be the place for you. So all of those are examples of the term comparative advantage. Okay, now let's just go through all the places where comparative advantages should be had in Asia. Where will you find oil production? All over the Middle East. There's a ton of great oil spots in the Middle East. People can just pump oil right out of the ground there. Russia and some parts of China, but the parts of China, it's really, really tiny. And then why? Well, just the geology of those parts of the world are just that they got oil and other people don't. Okay, it's just the luck of the draw. They also do have the capital to extract it. I think there are some parts of the world where there is oil. Like, for example, there is a lot of oil in the Arctic Circle at the top of the world, but it's really hard to get to, and there's a big debate over who even owns it. But it keeps these countries relatively wealthy, especially Saudi Arabia. If somebody found an alternative for oil, the Middle East would go broke real quick. All right, so let's check it out. These are some oil derricks in Siberia and Russia. Here's some oil derricks in the middle of, I think, Venezuela. And here's where the big oil-producing countries are in Asia. It's really only Russia, Saudi Arabia. Those are kind of the major players. And here's some guys doing the oil thing. And this is where you'll find oil in Russia. So just tons of it in the middle of Russia. And hardly anybody lives there, so people can just mine away to their heart's content. And they're not really going to frustrate anybody. Okay, where are you going to find coal production in Asia? Coal production is a huge deal today in China. The Chinese get so much of their energy from coal, it's kind of ridiculous. The entire world used to get their energy from coal back during the Industrial Revolution in the later 1800s, and coal makes a ton of pollution. It makes the air in cities really hard to breathe, and we in the Western world have kind of moved away from coal. We still do use some coal, but not nearly as much as we used to. The Chinese, on the other hand, their power is increasing all the time, and they need more and more energy, so they're burning tons and tons of coal. China has almost zero environmental protection laws, so some of the most polluted places in the world today are China. I've had a lot of friends and family that have visited China over the years, and they don't really have any positive things to say about the environment of China, because a lot of the cities, the air is pretty darn gross. Okay, so let's check out coal production here. So this shows you in 1980, China made 0.68 billion tons of coal. And then 30 years later, they're making 3.5 billion tons of coal. So their coal production has gone up, what is this? 6 times over. So they're 6 times more polluted today than they were in the 1980s. And this is what you'll see in a lot of Chinese cities. They've got these big coal plants producing energy right next to people's apartment buildings. We do still have some coal plants here in the United States, but we have all kinds of regulations saying you got to be really far away from the cities. We don't want to contaminate the air that people are generally breathing. But the Chinese, they just don't care. Okay, here's some Chinese people living the coal life. Here they are just mining coal, and there's people trying to walk through a city trying to breathe. You know, you think that with these masks, you're like, oh, Mr. Brown, those masks are because this picture was taken in 2020. It's like, no, this picture was taken in 2008. Okay, like, it's just hard to breathe over there. Here's kids getting some breathing problems. But, hey, you got to power these Chinese factories somehow, right? And here they are just, they're just not happy working that factory. Okay, where will you find technology companies in Asia? You will find so many technology companies in Japan and South Korea. Why those two countries? Well, they were the two countries that were first industrialized way back in the day. These countries have a long history of factories and automation, and Japan got industrialized a little bit after the United States, but they're almost to par. So the Japanese are definitely the top tier builders in Asia. And you're like, well, Mr. Brown, but China makes so much more. Well, Japan makes these highly specialized electronics, computerized technology. China tends to do I don't know if I want to say the less quality work, but it's even possible that they could work hand in hand. Like, I know the big Foxconn factory in China is where they do put the Apple products together, but they don't actually make the microchips in China. They probably make the microchips in Japan. And that's because the Japanese and the South Koreans, they have far more focus on technology and far more focus on education. Their workers are generally more capable of doing these very delicate, very high-skilled parts of creating technology. And the high literacy rate, that's great too. So it makes these two countries very, very rich because, hey, they're making the top end products that not a lot of Asian countries even have the ability to make. So their workers do demand higher salaries. That's maybe a little disadvantage, but there's no real other choice when it comes to making technology than Asia, in Asia than Japan or South Korea. All right, moving on. So here's some Korean kids studying in high schools. Mr. Brown remembers his time living in the country, saw a lot of that. That the degree of happy, percentage of people who have a bachelor's degree, Korea, Japan, New Zealand. So yeah, there's a lot more people who go to college in Korea and Japan than even in New Zealand. And then spending on public education, the Koreans spend 20% more on public education than us and double what the Canadians spend. That's wild. So here we go. Here's some statistics about Asian electronic locations. So China makes 80% of mobile PCs, but Japan makes all these like unique parts for the PCs. Yeah, so Japan makes the pieces for the computer, and the computer's probably assembled in China. South Korea is kind of the same way. 50% of all the memory drives, wow, so they make the pieces for the computer, but they're put together in another country where the workers are cheaper. So, yeah, somebody has to build the pieces of a computer, and they do it in South Korea and Japan. All right, moving on. And then look at these robots in Japan building stuff for the Japanese. And here's some people working on fancy microchip stuff. Got to build that hardware somewhere. Samsung Electronics, South Korea. Okay, all this industrialization has absolutely improved the economies of South Korea and Japan. And so they're also producers of Asian pop culture. Okay, like there's so many kids that I know in high schools in America who are like, Mr. Brown, I love anime. Mr. Brown, I love K-pop. And they're all about Japan. They're all about South Korea. And it's because the Japanese and the South Koreans have that sort of higher economic standing in Asia that they do have this globalized culture. I'm just really curious to know of any kids who are really, really into like Chinese stuff. So far, haven't really found any, unless if the kid is ancestrally from China. But as soon as you see just American teenagers starting to sing Chinese songs and watch Chinese TV and eat Chinese food, then we'll know that the Chinese have kind of grown up to this higher level of industrialization and global cultural influence. But still, I think for a decade or more, we're going to see Japan and South Korea have a cultural influence on us because, hey, they've got all those higher levels of industrialization and education. So they're definitely culturally diffusing around the world. They had the Winter Olympics in 2018, and they were supposed to have the Summer Olympics in 2020 in Tokyo. I was supposed to be there. It was going to be an epic time. Got to engage my Japanese culture, but the stupid pandemic stopped me. All right, let's check it out. So here's just all these things. I think these are they South Korea bands? I don't remember. But Attack on Titan, it's an excellent anime. Good old sushi, my favorite. Korean pajang dishes, I love it. A white dude in Japan, I've been there. Japanese people, and then the Olympics. Yeah, they got it. Okay, where will you find textile clothing manufacturing in Asia? I don't know if I talked about textiles yet, but it's just another word for anything to do with cloth. And you will actually find the most textile manufacturing in China, but the country of Bangladesh has the most per person. Okay, China's just so big. They have so many people. Like, of course, they're going to make a lot of textiles. But second place is probably the Bangladeshis. Why? Well, Bangladesh has the lowest paid workers in the world. And you don't really have to be that skilled when you're operating a sewing machine and putting clothes together. So Bangladesh has a ton of people with no education. They're desperate for any kind of work, no matter how low the salary. And there's a lot of American clothing businesses. I know famously American Eagle, Abercrombie & Fitch, Hollister. They make these really fancy clothes in Bangladesh. And they sell the clothes here for, I don't know, $100 for a pair of jeans in the United States, but they pay the worker in Bangladesh who made it like $1. So there's definitely some pretty messed up abuse of workers going on in our modern world today. And the condition for these workers is just terrible. There have been times where like the factories fell apart and a bunch of people died. But this sort of makes historical sense and sense of just how the world economy works, because Bangladesh is having huge migrations into cities. These cities can't support all these new people, so the people in Bangladesh are just desperate for any kind of work, and they're willing to work for $1 an hour to sew clothes for the Western world. Okay, so let's check out what's going on in Bangladesh. So here's a bunch of Bangladeshis making your clothes. And usually when we're in a live class, I have kids look at the tags of their shirts, see exactly where their clothes came from. And a lot of them are probably going to be from some of these third world countries like Bangladesh. So there's Bangladesh right there in the middle of Asia. And there's a lady walking home through a bunch of trash. Here's where a lot of those people live. Bangladesh is really rough. The cost of labor in Bangladesh, what does this say? US dollars per hour, 23 cents. Dang. Wow. So if they work an 8-hour day, they get less than $2. That's, wow, incredible. And then here's, they got child labor going on there. That's super messed up. And here's kids working in the textile mills in Bangladesh today. Okay, where will you find the most tourism in Asia? Once again, the technical answer is China, because China is such a ridiculously big country and there's 1 billion people who live there. But if we go down to the per capita level, then we're going to talk about Thailand. Thailand's entire economy, 48% of their economy, I shouldn't say their entire, but still, almost half of their economy comes from tourism. And I'm sure that during the 2020 global pandemic, Thailand is suffering. If nobody can go to Thailand, nobody can make money. It just really, really sucks. But why? Why is Thailand the tourism destination? Well, Thailand has a lot of great beaches. It has a lot of natural beauty. And look, I've been to Thailand. I'm probably biased about this. It is my favorite country in the world to visit. Okay? Super duper fun time in Thailand. Things are generally really cheap. People generally treat you really nice. But the really sad thing is, the reality of it is, a lot of people in Thailand are just really poor, and they resort to just making money off of tourists any way they can. They see generally people who aren't Thai, and they're just like, oh, hey, those people are tourists. They probably have money. I'm going to cut them a deal to get some of their money. But yeah, and Thailand just doesn't have the industrial capability to specialize in anything else. And if they got tourists, they're going to capitalize on it, and they're going to specialize in it, no doubt. All right, so there's Thailand right there at the bottom of Asia. And then expenditure, the destinations. So what are the most common destinations in Asia? It looks like so many people go to Bangkok, because Bangkok's just a fun city. I've been there myself. Okay, and then the international tourism receipts. So we got USA, Spain, China, France, Macau, Italy, UK, Germany, Thailand. So yep, Thailand is the 8th tourist centric country in the world. And Macau is technically a part of China, so I would even say they're the 7th. But yeah, pretty crazy. And who would have thought that America has so much tourism? I didn't think that many people came to America to check us out. But I don't know, a lot of people like to see the Grand Canyon and stuff, I guess. And wow, we outnumber Spain by 3 times over. Wow, good job, America. Did something right. All right, and there's some Thai people hanging out on an elephant. Super fun to ride an elephant, kids. I highly recommend it. And then, yep, there's some cool stuff you see in Thailand. Oh, man, Thailand. Oh, Thailand's just the best. So great. And then there's all kinds of fun stuff to have in Thailand. Okay, but this is definitely kind of a lesson overall. As a society becomes more industrialized, they become more globalized. It just sort of makes sense. Once you have joined the team of countries that are super into factories, super into education, super into international trade, every single city sort of looks the same. And it was really shocking to me when I moved to South Korea and I saw McDonald's and Burger King and KFC and American movies in the movie theaters. Like, I wanted, it's weird for me to say this, I wanted to go to another country on the other side of the world and experience something totally new. And look, I experienced a lot of cool new things in South Korea, don't get me wrong, but many things about South Korea were almost too familiar. And it just tells me that we now live in this globalized society where everything's sort of shared. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's just sort of an unexpected thing that I experienced. So let's see how globalized our world truly is. So what do we got here? This is a McDonald's menu. So you're like, oh, it's McDonald's, but it's in probably China. But then you look at the menu, you're like, oh, wait, you can't get any of that stuff in America. So does this show globalization, or does it show a unique culture? I mean, I'll let you decide. You could argue it either way. And then here's an Asian lady who's clearly wearing white people clothes, okay? Jeans were invented by white people. She's got the French beret, so she's sort of modeling European-style clothes, when I'm sure 100, 200 years ago, you'd go to an Asian country and no one would be wearing clothes like that. Here's a Pizza Hut in Shanghai. And then here's Disney Resort Shanghai. Okay, you're like, oh, is this China or is this Los Angeles? Come on. And then they're watching the Avengers over there. And what is this? The first Starbucks in Shanghai. It was a big deal. A lot of people really like this giant Starbucks there. And then how China's fertility rate compares. Yeah, so as China becomes more industrialized, they're going to start looking more and more like the Western world. They're going to be getting that stage 4 of the demographic transition model, and their birth rate's just going to sort of naturally fall off as well. Births per woman in South Korea, 1.1. Ooh. Yeah, South Korea, you're approaching a stage 5 economy real quick. It actually says that their birth rate were below the Japanese in this 1 year. So, like, wow, South Korea, you're in trouble. Did they always have fancy hospitals? Yeah, let's ask that question, because I'll tell you, back in the 1950s during the Korean War, Koreans had largely no idea about modern medicine. But they industrialized, they kind of copied the Western world, and I'll tell you, I've been in hospitals in South Korea, and they're top tier. Maybe even in some ways better than American hospitals. Do they always live in big cities? Okay, like, did cities this big and this crowded exist in Asia before? Not necessarily. Not this big or this crowded. But once you get industrialized, cities become so much more of an important part of your economy and your society that everybody's going to crowd together. I mean, the biggest city in the world today is Tokyo, 30 million people. Maybe it's even 40 million people now, and it's twice as big as New York City. Which gender typically did the work? Well, back in the past, probably had the men doing all the work and the women staying at home. But what will you see today in Japan and South Korea and more in China is ladies participating in the workplace. So get it, girls. All right, that's it for Mr. Brown. Peace out.